So Gary Johnson and William Weld participated in a CNN town hall where they answered questions from moderator Chris Cuomo and various audience members. Since a lot of people took issue with their answers, I thought I'd give mine, from my libertarian point of view. I'm going to skip the ones that are asked about them in particular, but here are my answers to the policy questions they asked.
What is a libertarian? That has been the main question.
A libertarian is someone who wants you to live free to live your lives as you see fit, not as some politician or bureaucrat thinks you should. We reject all forms of aggression in our social, political, and economic lives, and we define aggression as the initiation of force. As long as you're minding your own business, engaging with people voluntarily, or conducting an economic transaction peacefully, no one has any business using force against you.
The return from Trump was that Hillary Clinton is the most corrupt person to ever run for president. Is that a view that you would embrace?
I don't know. She's got a lot of competition for that. I do know that Martha Stewart went to prison on far less, with a lot less evidence that she actually did what she was convicted for. This isn't really a testament against Hillary's corruption, though, but the corruption of our entire political system, where politicians regularly commit acts you and I would go to prison for, but nothing happens to them.
Governor Johnson, let's do some word association here. I'll say the name, you hit me with the first thing that comes to mind. Remember, we've got an audience here and a lot of people watching out there as well. President Barack Obama.
Slick Chicago politician.
One. Hillary Clinton.
Hypocrite.
Donald Trump.
Demagogue.
It's time now for questions from the audience. First up, we have Jeanette McCoy. Jeanette was inside the Pulse nightclub when it was attacked on June 12th.
How would making it easier to buy guns with minimum requirements, especially unnecessary military rifles, how is that making it easier for us?
You know, I really wish there were more and better research on this. Unfortunately, our government stopped doing that kind of research during the Clinton administration, but a guy named Davy Barker looked at the details of 100 mass shootings and found that when the shooter was stopped by police, the average death toll was 14. When the shooter was stopped by an armed citizen, not a policeman, the average death toll dropped to 1.8. Look at how many of these shootings occurred in places where it was illegal to carry a firearm, and that includes Orlando. Could an armed citizen or two have made a difference there? No one can say, but the statistics would certainly be on their side. But none of these gun control measures would work. People talk about Mateen being investigated by the FBI, but what they don't seem to want to mention is that he was cleared each time. So if the FBI could find no problem with this guy, what kind of background check could? Waiting lists wouldn't. He'd planned this for months, like most mass shooters. The sad fact of the matter is there's probably nothing we can do to deter someone who is willing to give his life to do harm. All we can do is not take away from the people the most effective means they have of defending themselves.
Right now you have a sit-in going on, at least right before we started. I don't know what the current status is. But do you agree with what is driving the sit-in by the congressman right now?
No, the sit-in is about secret lists, about making people on the terrorist watch list or the no-fly list unable to purchase a firearm. These lists completely abrogate due process. They shouldn't be used to stop people from flying. They certainly shouldn't be used to deny someone a protected constitutional right. As far as I know, there's no way to tell if you're on the terrorist watch list, and the only way to find out if you're on the no-fly list is by buying a ticket and trying to get past the TSA checkpoint. There have been cases where 6-year-old kids have gotten on the no-fly list and parents haven't been able to get them off. If you're going to deny someone the right to carry a firearm, it must be through the court system, after a proper conviction, and during sentencing where the defense counsel can argue that this person shouldn't have his Second Amendment rights taken. That is the proper way to deny someone their rights in this country. Anything else is totalitarianism.
In the event that there's a fellow American who doesn't get health insurance or even opts out and then gets sick and can't afford the cost of the care that he needs to survive, is it really a libertarian principle that society should say he's made a choice, bears the consequences, and should be allowed to die?
People don't need government to be compassionate. In fact, government gets in the way of compassion. The federal government has been seriously messing with our healthcare system for 50 years. Before then, we had free clinics and charity hospitals everywhere. We formed mutual aid societies. We took care of each other. Now, anyone who tries gets shut down by the government because they compete with the insurance companies. That's insane. Meanwhile, in countries with government-run healthcare, people are put on these hideously long waiting lists and are literally dying to get healthcare. A lot of them come here or to India or Jordan to get life-saving medical procedures done. It's not the free market system that says people should be allowed to die if there are no healthcare resources available to them.
Earlier today, House Speaker Paul Ryan unveiled the Republican plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. What would you do with Obamacare?
Repeal it and repeal all of the other meddling in the last 50 years. Repeal the HMO Act. I don't know where people get off blaming the free market for HMOs when they were created as an act of Congress. Medicare and Medicaid recipients are paying several times as much out of pocket for health care than they were in 1960, even after adjusting for inflation. By every objective measure, these policies have only made things worse. Let markets work. Let people purchase insurance across state lines. We can decouple health insurance from employers simply by lifting all the caps on health savings accounts and letting people use them to pay insurance premiums. Then employers could just contribute to the HSA and people could select whatever plan they want and keep it if they quit or get laid off. Whatever money is contributed is theirs to use for whatever healthcare expenses they feel they need, and it stays with them no matter what, no matter how much it is.
Another question. Emily Laser.
Governor Johnson, on your website you state that a woman's right to choose is the law of the land, and that if a woman wants to exercise that right, she should be able to do so without being subject to persecution or denied healthcare access. However, states like Texas continuously put laws in place that restrict abortion services as well as clinics. As a libertarian, what do you view as the federal government's role in ensuring a woman's right to choose in every state?
Well, they're violating Planned Parenthood versus Casey, which says that as long as the woman gives informed consent, they can't deny it after 24 hours unless the fetus is viable, which is defined as able to survive on its own outside the womb. And I mean, that's okay. You can put it up for adoption at that point. But I mean, if they took that right from you, you'd have the ability to seek a remedy in federal court.
Let's go to another question from Amanda Lindeman that kind of touches on the outer parameters of this discussion we're having on this issue in particular. She lives in New York, currently undecided. Amanda.
Good evening. Thank you for coming this evening and taking my question. Do you pray and do you believe in God?
No to both, but I think the issue of religion is irrelevant to someone who believes in the First Amendment. In America, we have a free market in religion, and we have a wonderful diversity of churches, temples, synagogues for literally thousands of different religions and denominations. You should be free to believe or not believe as your heart and your head tell you. The only religion I actually oppose is statism. It's amazing to me how many people, including many atheists, have made the state their god, an omnipotent being that can do no wrong and that can change reality just by putting words on paper. It's absolutely the most dangerous religion we have because its main tenet is initiating force to get its way.
Another question, shall we? Paul Jost.
Thank you. The presumptive Republican nominee has said that he wants to build a big, huge, very expensive wall on our border with Mexico. He also wants to deport 11 million undocumented residents. Do you agree with this plan? And if not, what do you plan to do to defuse this very emotional situation?
Well, in a way, this goes to my previous answer. People think that politicians and bureaucrats did some kind of magic when they drew imaginary lines on a map, usually by killing a lot of people to determine where those lines should be. But no one else should be forced to go along with their psychotic role-playing game. Peaceful people have a right to cross whatever imaginary lines they wish to live and work and be a part of society. And for all Trump's bleating about how he wants to make America great again, it's precisely America's permissive immigration policy in the 19th century that allowed it to become great. Immigration is a benefit to everyone, native and non-native, poor, working class, skilled or unskilled. Immigrants are just a convenient scapegoat for politicians to point at as the cause of so many of our problems, but they just aren't. And the statistics bear this out completely. They don't take jobs, they increase jobs and pay even for low-skilled natives. They commit violent crimes far less often, and they use far less in government welfare and other services for the taxes they pay compared to their native counterparts. They're a benefit in just about every conceivable way.
Christina Casalino.
Hello. If you had a choice, Trump or Clinton, which one would you pick?
That's a bit like asking me if I want syphilis or gonorrhea. Neither one, thanks. Although ironically, if you'd included Bernie Sanders, believe it or not, I might be tempted to pick him. Okay, the guy's an idiot when it comes to economics, but on everything else he's pretty good. He's for marijuana legalization, he's got a pretty good foreign policy, and even when it comes to economics, I think we share the same goals. It's just that I've actually read economics books, and I know that the simplistic feel-good solutions he proposes just won't work. But I think our goals are pretty much in alignment. I can't say that about Hillary or Trump.
But if you had to say that one of these is more qualified than the other to be president.
Look, the only qualifications for president are 35 years old, natural-born citizen, lived in the U.S. for 14 years. Any other qualification is just about what you yourself prioritize, but I don't see any way to prioritize between the giant douche and the turd sandwich.
We have Maureen Morella. She's from West Milford, New Jersey, and she's currently undecided, and she has a really important question. Please.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, governors. Governors, when one of my sons was 16 years old, he went out with some friends and he did a line of heroin. It did not end well for him. He became very sick and vomited. He aspirated and was left with brain damage so severe that now, 12 years later, he remains in a wheelchair with no ability to eat or speak, and he is fed through a tube in his stomach. His dad and I take 100% care of him. He has enough cognitive ability that he goes out with me and speaks at every forum where we are asked to go. A message about not doing drugs. We live in an extremely high-risk society, and this is a normal for our children. So, governors, please explain to me how you think that legalizing marijuana straight through to heroin can possibly be a harm reduction forum. It makes no sense to me. And when you go out on the road with me, I can assure you that these young people say, can you people in positions of power please get rid of the drugs? We don't want to lose any more of our siblings or friends.
First of all, I'm very sorry for what happened to your son. I'm a parent, and I can only imagine how I would react if that were one of my kids. And my son's autistic, so believe me, I know all about caring for someone who chronologically should be an adult. But what you have to realize is that the problem that caused this damage for your son isn't a problem with drugs, it's a problem with prohibition. Now, I don't know your son's case specifically, whether he was taking more heroin than he thought or whether it was cut with something dangerous, but drug dealers don't check IDs. They don't label their product. It might not even be the drug they want, but a different, cheaper, and more dangerous drug. So much of this discussion has been around marijuana because of its minimal dangers, but a drug like heroin being dangerous is a better reason to legalize it. The last thing you want to do with a dangerous substance is put all of the decisions regarding its manufacture, distribution, and sale into the hands of the criminal black market, and that's all prohibition can ever do. But things become completely different when they're put in the hands of responsible private enterprise. 15 years ago, Portugal decriminalized all drug possession. Now, fewer people are doing heroin. A lot fewer children are trying it. There are fewer addicts, and what addicts there are can easily find help, which they're afraid to do here because they don't want to tell anyone about it for fear they'll call the cops. And yet, for decades, high schoolers here have reported that it's easier for them to get illegal drugs than to get alcohol. The fact is, if drugs were legal, your son might not even have tried it at all, and if he did, it would have been a known dosage with a safe filler, so the chances that this would have happened to him would have been minuscule, if not non-existent. The problem isn't the drugs, it's the war on drugs. Now, legalization isn't a solution to our drug problem, it's a solution to our crime problem, our violence problem, our overdose problem, our health problem. Drug users don't overdose in some crazy attempt to get a bigger high. They overdose because they have no idea how much of what they're taking is the drug and how much is the filler. So once we legalize drugs, we will have to work together on solutions to the drug problem, but we'll be able to do that much more easily when they're legal. The most addictive drug we know of is nicotine, and yet half of all adult cigarette smokers quit after 10 years. And that's only going to get better with new market innovations like e-cigarettes. If tobacco had been illegal, e-cigs, the patch, nicotine gums, and so on would never have been allowed to be produced. But legalize drugs and the market responds to the demands of all the people in this country just like you who want to fix all of the problems associated with drugs of all kinds. There are tons of products to help you stop smoking. There are lots of organizations to help alcoholics. Legalize drugs and you'll see things like this for drugs like heroin. Prohibition doesn't work. If we still had alcohol prohibition, you might be here talking about how your son had brain damage from drinking bathtub gin, which actually happened in the 1920s while Al Capone was running around shooting people with Tommy guns. All of that went away when alcohol prohibition ended. It'll go away again when drug prohibition ends.
Let's go to Jeremiah Wegner. He's a student at Columbia University. He says he's leaning towards supporting you, Governor Johnson.
So, as a previously enlisted Army Ranger who's deployed to the Middle East 6 times, I've seen firsthand the epic, wasteful amount of spending done in our global war on terror. I understand that if elected, Governor, your plan is to reduce the federal budget by 20% across all departments. So my question is, how do you balance maintaining the world's most dominant military force while attempting to eliminate wasteful spending?
Oh, geez, when it comes to wasteful spending, nobody beats the Pentagon. From $600 hammers to multi-billion-dollar bombers that never even get used, most of it is one big boondoggle for the military-industrial complex. Eliminate that and bring the troops home, and we can have a much more effective military, one that actually does national defense instead of international offense, at a fraction of the costs. And we'll have a lot fewer enemies to fight in the first place once we stop shooting and dropping bombs on innocent people in countries we aren't even officially at war with.
Do you believe that there should be U.S. military intervention in Syria, given the context, which is, without U.S. help, it does not seem that they can get it done? Where do you then see a role for U.S. military in the world on all the various theaters right now where we're involved?
Well, I think we all agree we have to defend ourselves when attacked, and we have been attacked by ISIS and other organizations. But ISIS isn't actually a state, and we shouldn't legitimize it by treating it like one. So instead of war, the Constitution gives Congress the power to issue letters of marque and reprisal to go after these specific people causing the problems, not a whole bunch of innocents who happen to be around at the time. Obama's drones kill something like 45 innocent people for every suspected ISIS member killed. Really, ISIS couldn't ask for a better recruitment tool than that. Go after the individuals who are attacking us, give them a public trial, and let justice be done.
How can you not be involved in Syria, which is obviously a big swath of the Levant where ISIS has its stronghold? How do you stay out of there?
Look, ISIS wasn't ISIS before we intervened in Syria to begin with. They weren't anywhere in the Levant before then. Syria is their foothold now. Before the U.S. meddled, they were just ISI, the Islamic State of Iraq. A 2012 Pentagon document recently released under the Freedom of Information Act warned that intervention in Syria would allow ISI to get a foothold there. And they were right. Assad was against ISIS, just like Saddam Hussein was against them before. All our interventionism has done is give them breeding ground. Step one in solving a problem is always to stop whatever it is that caused it to begin with. And here, that's interventionism.
Jim Tassone joins us now. He has a question. He's a management consultant from New Jersey. He's the vice chair of the New Jersey Libertarian Party.
Both of the major party candidates have embraced a protectionist, anti-free trade policy. Tell us why supporting free trade benefits American businesses and American consumers.
Oh, there's no question that it does. The great economist Milton Friedman pointed out that every time people have been lifted out of poverty, it's been due to capitalism and free trade. The free trade agreements we have now, though, are nothing of the kind. They're these huge monstrosities that are as long as Lord of the Rings. A real free trade agreement should only be one sentence long. No restrictions on trade.
How do you generate good jobs in the United States?
Set people free to create them. One of the biggest problems in our country's economy is the immense regulatory burden. For decades, it's been the case that businesses spend more money complying with regulations than they make in profits, and it's only gotten worse over time. But the big corporations lobby for these regulations since they can better handle the additional costs than their smaller competition. So small businesses can't compete. People can't make new startups to compete with them. It's cronyism. It's corporatism. It's a subtle form of fascism, and it's absolutely what libertarians are against. I once saw an analysis that showed that for every regulator government hires, 150 jobs are lost. So here's how I create jobs. Fire a regulator. That creates one private sector job for the regulator, plus 149 others. And then watch my smoke. 150 jobs, 150 jobs, 150 jobs, boom, boom, boom. Most of them from all the small businesses that will spring up. We've had corporatism for way too long in this country. It's time to go back to free markets where small businesses dominate and become the lifeblood of a sustainable economy. Something else we can do is eliminate the corporate income tax. Ours is the highest in the world, and businesses everywhere are saying it's the reason they're moving away. Ireland is doing far better than other states in the European Union because it has a relatively low corporate tax of 12.5%. But there's no reason for a corporate tax at all. It just increases the cost of doing business. That means that we pay more for products on the shelf, the businesses hire fewer workers and at lower levels of pay, and they have less ability to expand and create more jobs. Let's make the corporate tax rate 0% and watch the jobs come flooding back in. You'll also get rid of a lot of Washington lobbyists, since one big reason they're all there is for special tax favors and punitive regulations against their competition. Do away with those, and they have no reason to be there at all.
Let's bring in Ahmad Green.
My question is, it has been repeatedly stated by numerous Libertarian candidates in the media that they respect but do not endorse the Black Lives Matter movement. Others have said that they do not support the movement for Black Lives entirely. Where do you stand on supporting, protecting, and upholding the human and civil rights of Black people and people of African descent in the United States and across the diaspora? Thank you.
I think a mistake the civil rights movement avoided, but that's being made today, is making it about race. That was exactly the opposite of what Martin Luther King wanted. He didn't want race to be a factor at all. Now, I applaud Black Lives Matter for pointing out problems with racist cops, but that's hardly our only police problem. Kelly Thomas was white, and yet he was literally beaten to death by cops for no reason, and they got away with it scot-free. One cop I read about who sexually abused a 4-year-old girl had all sorts of people coming to defend him. It's crazy. We need to get rid of this cop worship that we have in this country and make them subject to accountability. If you do that, then you can easily deal with the racist cops when they show themselves, but without it, you can't do anything. So this issue is bigger than race. It goes to the attitudes we have about government. Like I said earlier, the state being a religion that can do no wrong. And speaking out against cops, even violent cops, is like speaking out against priests. That's what we need to change. And Dr. King understood that. Make it about character, not race. Because when you make it about race, no matter which direction you're coming from, you'll lose. Every time. But I do think the best thing we can do for blacks in this country is end the war on drugs, which is the source of a lot of this racism and police violence.
Last question. Alex Zacharias. He's from Palm Beach, Florida, and he has not decided yet who he's voting for.
In your opinion, what do you feel is the greatest challenge facing our country's next president?
I think it's just dealing with the fact that our government has too many fingers in too many places it should never have been in to begin with. And nobody is talking about the problems inherent in Social Security and Medicare, Medicaid, which their trustees have been warning about for years, but no one's done anything about. The time is coming, and it's almost here. The effects of these unsustainable policies will have to be dealt with.
Do you have a plan for what to do with entitlements, Social Security?
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to have to face up to the fact that entitlements are mathematically unsustainable. But there's still time to fix the issue without causing too many problems. With all the jobs that will be created in a libertarian America, revenues in the short term will be less of an issue, and we do need to cut benefits, which I think we can mostly do with means testing. I don't think any plan that doesn't have means testing based on net worth is going to succeed. You have to do at least that much. And then you can start letting young people opt out. More and more seniors will be able to have jobs, work that's less physically demanding. And I think we could phase out Social Security in a few decades without putting anyone in the poorhouse, without any seniors starving in the streets, and our grandchildren will be wondering why on earth we ever did such a stupid thing to begin with. It can be scary when it's the status quo and you're steeped in it, but when you look at how prosperous a truly free country is, you'll never want to go back to it. So, those are all my answers. Thank you all for listening to them, and as always, stay strong and be free.